Hi everyone, welcome to the Enthusiastic Buddhist. In today's video, I'd like to talk about how we can stop the everyday struggle and find peace in our everyday lives. So let's face it, our lives are full of constant challenges. We are always having to do things that we don't enjoy, whether it's going to a job we're not passionate about, cleaning the house, or having to attend certain social gatherings when we'd rather be anywhere else, or just anything that brings up a lot of resistance in our mind. When we have to do these things we don't enjoy, it can almost seem like torture for us. We start having all these negative thoughts and we might complain to others, and all this resistance just ends up making us feel miserable. I mean, we're miserable having to do the thing we don't enjoy, and we're miserable beforehand in anticipation of having to do the thing we don't enjoy. So this means that we can end up spending a lot of our day struggling against our daily reality and the things we have to do. So how can we find peace in our life when our days are filled with seemingly unpleasant experiences? Well, fortunately, there is an answer to this problem, and it can be found in one of the stories told by the Buddhist teacher Ajahn Brahm. He recounted a story about helping a fellow monk out who was experiencing this very problem. You see, at that time, Ajahn Brahm and this monk were living in Thailand and following the Thai forest monk tradition. And in their tradition, it was common practice for them to have group meditations where they would meditate all night. So they wouldn't actually go to bed until sunrise the next day. And on one occasion, after meditating all night, a junior Australian monk was pulled aside by the abbot of the monastery, and he asked this junior monk to wash some robes for him. Now, we're not talking just one or two robes, but a whole pile of them. And in the Thai forest tradition, they don't wash clothes like we do. It's not like they throw the robes into a washing machine, add some detergent, and then push a button. They have to wash robes according to the Thai forest monk tradition, which means first this monk had to collect the water from a well and then start a fire to boil the water. Then he had to chop some special wood from a particular fruit tree, then boil those wood chips in order to create the detergent. Then the detergent had to be poured onto each robe separately, and then each robe was beaten by hand in order to be cleaned. And then he finally had to keep turning the robes in the sun in order to make sure that the dye didn't streak. So as you can imagine, after you've spent all night meditating and you're extremely exhausted and someone asks you to do something like this, which is going to take hours, and he wants you to do it immediately, well, this monk was just furious. He was fuming. He was cursing and saying lots of un-Buddhist things. So Ajahn Brahm went up to him and gave him a piece of wisdom that he'd also learnt from his time being a monk. And he said to this junior monk, thinking about it is much harder than doing it. Thinking about it is much harder than doing it. And that piece of wisdom sunk into the junior monk's mind, and he understood straight away. If he continued to think about the work he had to do, or how unfair it was that he'd been asked to do it, and allowed all these negative thoughts to continue percolating in his mind, then of course the activity was going to be difficult and painful for him. But if he just let go of his negative thoughts and dropped them, then he would experience peace. I mean, it's not compulsory that when we're doing something that we don't enjoy, that we have to complain about it as well. That's a choice we can make. We can actually choose freedom and a tranquil mind over the narrating mind that just wants to complain about things. And that's what I want to talk about today, about how often we allow our complaining mind, our narrative mind, to destroy the peace of our mind, and that increases our struggles in our daily life. When we're doing something we don't enjoy and we start experiencing all these negative thoughts and resistance in our mind, or if we're simply dreading something in anticipation, one of the things you'll notice is that it actually prevents us from fully experiencing the present moment and finding anything to enjoy in the moment. I mean, even if we have to do something we don't enjoy, it doesn't mean that the whole experience is always going to be completely negative. You know, if we can strip back the negative commentary, we might be surprised at what we can find. So in the case of the junior monk washing clothes, all the actions he had to do might not have been that unpleasant. Making wood chips might have been quite a meditative experience if he was fully present with it. Stirring the wood chips in the water might have been quite calming, and he could have enjoyed the nature around him, the freshness of the morning, and the sounds of birds around him as well. If we take away our resistance and the craving to be elsewhere and just be with our actions, then there's every chance we can find something positive, even in a seemingly unpleasant situation. And if we can't find anything external to reflect on that's positive, sometimes just coming back to our breath can be the answer to finding something positive and peaceful. So it really is a matter of tweaking our perspective and allowing ourselves to silence this inner critic that's always judging our experiences, comparing it to other experiences, or wanting something different. I mean, in the scenario with the monk, there had to be an eventual end to his unpleasant duty. He wasn't going to be stuck washing robes for eternity. It had to end sometime. So why make it difficult for yourself when there'll always be an end in sight? When we really look at it, we'll find that our complaining mind and our regurgitation of negative thoughts is what really makes a negative experience negative. Of course, we're not going to find anything positive about a situation when we have this resistance and don't want to be there and doing what we're doing. I mean, when we're at war in our minds with the present moment, how can we ever find peace? But if we learn to cut through that negative talk and just perform the action without all the commentary, then what do we have? We just have action. And when we just have action without all the negative commentary, so much unnecessary suffering is eliminated. And this can allow so much peace to arise instead. Now, it doesn't mean that we'll automatically enjoy what we're doing. I mean, sometimes we might have to do things that are really unpleasant. But the important thing is that we recognize how much unnecessary suffering we add on to our experience when we complain about it in our mind. But if we can take a few deep breaths and just drop the negative commentary and just do the action, we can find that things will almost be effortless. It doesn't have to be a struggle anymore because all that resistance has gone. And it's not that you're surrendering into further depression because you have no choice but having to do this thing, because then you'd still be complaining. It's like your body is like, I don't want to do this. Your mind is like, I don't want to do this. So we're not surrendering out of hopelessness here. Instead, it's about recognizing how we contribute to our experience with our thoughts, and how our negative thoughts builds up our resistance and creates most of our suffering. I mean, the truth is, there is no such thing as an inherently negative experience. Everything is dependent on our interpretation of it and how we add to our experience with our own thoughts. This piece of wisdom, thinking about it, is much harder than doing it. It has helped me so many times in my life. For instance, when I was in my first meditation retreat and I knew I had to recite so many hundreds of thousands of mantras in a particular set period of time, I would just look at the number and go, 300,000 mantras? Is it 1 million mantras? How on earth am I going to be able to finish these? And I'll be thinking, my goodness, I'm never going to be able to do this. You know, it felt like such a huge mountain I had to climb, and when you're right at the beginning and at the bottom, it can be quite overwhelming. You almost feel defeated before you've even started. But what I found was that if you just put one foot in front of the other and remember that thinking about it is much harder than doing it, if you just do it without thinking about it, then guess what? You know, you will start chipping away at how much you actually have to do. And before you know it, your time is over and you've actually completed the task without adding all that extra unnecessary suffering. I actually wrote this piece of wisdom, thinking about it is much harder than doing it. And I stuck it on the wall beside me where I was meditating during my first retreat, so that anytime I started feeling like, how am I ever going to get to the end of this? You know, I would read that and straight away all that unnecessary self-talk would just fall away. Actually, you can also apply this bit of wisdom when it comes to your own meditation practice too. You know how sometimes you think, oh, I should go and do a meditation practice, but then your complaining, procrastinating mind jumps in and says, oh, but meditation is too hard, it's too boring, you know, I have too many thoughts, you know, why don't you just go and watch TV instead? So you end up putting off your practice. Well, now you can apply this wisdom so that nothing stops you. Remember, thinking about it is much harder than doing it. So before your mind has any time to think about how your practice might go, and before all the potential resistance and excuses come up, you should just place one foot in front of the other. And before you know it, you'll find yourself sitting on your meditation cushion, meditating. And your mind will be like, what am I doing here? How did I get here? If you do this, you'll really start to move forward in your practice. You'll find yourself sitting on your meditation cushion before you give your mind any opportunity for negative self-talk or procrastination. And then if you just do your practice and don't think about it, then after your meditation session, you'll wonder what all the fuss was about. It really wasn't that hard to do a meditation session after all. So remember, thinking about it is much harder than doing it. Actually, I think this is a small preview to the great awakening that we can have as we progress on the Buddha's path, because as we continue to practice our meditation, the mind will calm down and the mental chatter will start to be eliminated. And as a result, this is how we can start living more fully present and alive in this moment. Because so much of the time we're not here because we are thinking, and we're not allowing ourselves to experience this moment because of the complaining mind aspect. But as you progress through these higher stages of meditation, it's said that the narrating mind ceases. And when you don't have that, that's when realizations of non-duality can start to arise, because the narrating mind is no longer looking at everything from its own self-absorbed perspective. So instead of thinking, I am doing, it just becomes doing. So we can have this action without commentary and without distinction between who's doing it and who you're doing it to. It just becomes spontaneous action and motion. And in another way, it just becomes love in action, because you're no longer thinking in a selfish, self-absorbed way. You're just doing, and naturally you're doing to help others. So your action becomes an expression of your love. But that's a pretty high realization to have, and that comes later when your meditation develops and a lot of barriers are falling away. So in some ways you could say that's the end goal. But to start with, what we can practice now in this present moment, it's just to remove that negative self-talk and remove the commentary that we usually allow to arise and continuously perpetuate when we're in a difficult situation. So next time you're in a situation where you're feeling, I don't want to be doing this, I don't want to go there, I don't want to do that, and all the resistance and negativity arises, just remind yourself thinking about it is much harder than doing it. Just reflect on that. So don't think about it, just do it. And you'll find that it's a lot easier to just do it than it is to think about it. And this is something we can bring to so many difficult situations in our lives. So I hope that piece of wisdom helps you. I'm sure we all have to face things during the day that we don't want to do, whether it's washing the dishes or going to work. Whatever it is, if we just do without bringing in the negative commentary, we will increase our mental peace and happiness. So that's all from me. Take care everyone, and I hope to see you in the next video.